Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, February 3rd, 2016, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Kaahumanu Friday, and another wacky, crazy weekend as we move further into this, what is going to be a tumultuous, chaotic year. There's just no two ways about it. Phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in, put you on the air with your questions and comments. Starting with the political news here, Rand Paul has quit the race for the White House, originally after the disappointing results from the Iowa caucuses. Yesterday he said, well, no, we're going to go to New Hampshire, and then I guess this morning he changed his mind, and he is now stepping down. Marco Rubio is trying to court Rand Paul's supporters to his campaign, even though the two had a great deal of differences regarding foreign policy. But the feeding frenzy is on. There are loose supporters in the water, and the sharks are beginning to gather. Now, this question about the validity, honesty, accuracy, fairness of the Iowa caucuses is not going to go away anytime soon. We're seeing all these stories coming out. Iowa politics now, amid Clinton victory, still questions about the caucuses. And they went out and they recovered some of those missing precinct data. Hillary's lead over Bernie Sanders has been whittled down to 0.2%, 0.2%. That's the only difference between them, but the Hillary campaign is out there saying, we are victorious, we have won, women will rise. And there's still a report that there are a couple of precincts whose data has yet to be found. Another story over in the Des Moines Register. Iowa's Nightmare Revisited. Was the correct winner called? And the shenanigans are out there on full display. The chairwoman of the Iowa Democrats has declared Hillary's 0.2% victory final. That's it. I don't want to hear anything from Bernie Sanders. Now, we all know that Hillary is a totally ruthless human being who cares not for the law, the Constitution, or the people. But it says something very dark about the American character that she has attracted so many supporters who know exactly who Hillary is and what Hillary has done, and they don't care so long as they get a woman in the White House. The entire campaign is a personality cult. And there has been another video surface about the Clinton campaign committing election fraud or trying to commit election fraud in the Ames district of Iowa. More of these are going to be coming out, I'm sure. Now, apparently over at the Sanders camp, when Hillary came on TV to proclaim her triumph, the crowd started shouting, she's a liar, she's a liar, she's a liar, and there's a video of it at WhatReallyHappened.com. And honestly, given that Sanders was down 30 points only a couple of months ago, he really did win Iowa because he caught up to Hillary. He may have beat her. But Hillary is already playing dirty. She has been playing dirty her entire life. That's why Sanders took second. Remember, the polls all had Sanders ahead. They had Trump ahead. When you see a reversal like that, especially with all the obvious skullduggery, even C-SPAN had to report it. It was that much in everybody's face. Sanders is considering a legal challenge to force the Iowa Democratic Party to conduct an honest recount. Because the chairwoman of the Iowa Democratic Party is digging in her heels and saying, no, Hillary won. Go away. You hate women. You're misogynist. Whatever. Donald Trump, in his first speech after coming in second in Iowa, was very statesmanlike. But I guess he's changed his mind. He's now standing up and saying, yeah, there's something very funny about the sudden shift, because with Hillary and Bernie Sanders, they were very close in the polls, but Sanders was slightly ahead. It was a much wider gap that Trump had over Cruz. And in less than a day, we are being told to believe that the voters had a change of heart and put Cruz out by that huge margin. The other part of it, of course, was Rubio did much better than expected. He got a lot more votes than the polls suggested, which suggested somewhere in that system, including those Microsoft goodies, votes were being taken away from Donald Trump and added to Marco Rubio. And if you go back and you study how these electronic vote riggings are being done over at blackboxvoting.org, it is a very common method to take votes from one candidate and give them to another so the total vote count comes out correct. And Hillary may have made a very bad mistake being so open about the election fraud so early in the race, because now everybody's seeing Sanders as a victim of the establishment. And apparently donations to his campaign are surging. Over in the Seattle Times, they had a comment about how Washington State donors have given more to Bernie Sanders than all the other candidates combined. Now, next up is at New Hampshire, and Bernie has the home court advantage there because he's from Vermont. He's a New Englander. He's going to be seen as local. And Hillary's going to have to work really, really hard and be very, very obvious to try and steal that primary. Now, Ben Carson is outright accusing Ted Cruz of committing election fraud in the Iowa caucuses. Now, Carson, of course, is not talking about going in and having games with those little Microsoft apps or stuffing ballot boxes or stealing ballots off the table so people couldn't sign up for the people that they wanted to. He's basically talking about that hoax message put out by Cruz's campaign workers just minutes before the caucuses began that Carson was dropping out. And it was carried all over. It was picked up on CNN. And yeah, it convinced a lot of Ben Carson supporters that he was out. And of course, Ted Cruz's people were saying, well, then you should vote for Ted Cruz. Now, was that illegal? No. It was definitely a dirty trick, though. And Ben Carson is comparing Ted Cruz's dirty tactics to Obama and the IRS scandal. I think it would be more accurate to say that Ted Cruz is running his campaign the way Richard Nixon ran his re-election campaign. It's all going to be dirty tricks. Now, the good news is that the American people got to see this all on display. So now they know there's dirty tricks in this campaign. They're going to be on the lookout for them. And that's going to make it harder for people to get away with this stuff. Everybody's going to be there with a cell phone in their hand recording the evidence of election fraud. Remember how obvious it was during the Scottish independence referendum? People were just throwing ballots on the counting table. Nice, neat, collated. They were moving ballots from yes to no, and they were being counted without being checked what they actually said. I mean, all kinds of obvious stuff. In a world of cell phone cameras, it is much harder to get away with this stuff, which is why they're moving it inside the electronic machines where nobody can see. The software for those Microsoft apps has not been made public. It is not open source. Nobody actually did a code inspection to look for dirty tricks in there, taking votes away from Trump and adding them to Rubio. It's just not it. There's no way to know. Now, Donald Trump is now out there saying, given all the irregularities that have surfaced, one of two things should happen. Either the Iowa results be rendered null and void and everybody's starting off equal again, or there should be a revote. And, yeah, there's no way Iowa was honest. Nobody's going to believe Iowa was nonsense. More about this when we come back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And to most Americans, it's obvious something happened in Iowa. Now, many, many years ago, I worked as a professional magician. I paid for my college education with that. So those student loan people got nothing on me. And as a magician, you learn that if you make a mistake, and people know something happened, it doesn't matter if they know exactly what did happen. The fact that they know something happened, you've lost the audience. You might as well wash off the makeup, change your clothes, and go home. And that's exactly what happened on Iowa. Everybody knows something happened. They're not exactly sure what. The disparity between the polls and the results on the GOP side tells us some kind of rigging was going on. And there are all those other instances of fraud in Iowa, the one caught by C-SPAN, the second video that surfaced today. This election is already so crooked, they're going to have to screw those ballots into the ballot boxes. There was Ted Cruz's hoax that Ben Carson was dropping out. But the lower than expected numbers for Trump and the higher than expected results for both Cruz and Rubio may not be the work of Cruz or Rubio. Let's not narrow down just yet. Remember the Watergate scandal, 1972 to 1974? It was eventually revealed that Richard Nixon's CREEP, which stood for the Committee to Re-elect the President, sabotaged the campaigns of Democrats who might be able to beat Nixon, leaving Nixon to run against George McGovern, whom Nixon trounced in a record landslide vote. Now remember, the young Hillary Rodham was on the Watergate Investigation Committee. She was later dismissed without a good recommendation for lying and dishonesty. And no doubt while on that committee, she received a thorough education in just how Nixon operated. So today, here, 2016, Hillary does not want to run against Trump. She knows she can't beat Trump. Trump will win. Hillary wants to run against Ted Cruz because she knows she can steamroller all over him if for no other reason than reminding everyone that Cruz was born in Canada and is ineligible to serve as president under the Constitution, no matter what they're saying over in Illinois. So I would not rule out Hillary and her friends at Microsoft as suspects just yet. But for the Iowa caucuses, the very first election in this long election year, to already have alerted the public that this is crooked, I think that's a good thing. Everybody's going to be on guard because they know this is not an honest, fair election season. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Doug in Tennessee, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael. Just calling in about the Iowa caucuses. Maybe I misunderstood what you said. I thought that you claimed that there were electronic voting machines involved.
No. What happened is Microsoft generously provided a computer application so that all the precincts could immediately send their results to the central tabulation center, without using phone lines or anything else. And the system had some obvious problems. Information from 90 precincts disappeared. That was 5% of the entire vote. And again, there was no civilian oversight of that software. There could be anything in there. And again, I would advise you to go to blackboxvoting.org, which is run by Bev Harris, and read all these horror stories about how any computer system connected with the election process is wide open to fraud.
No, I've listened to Bev Harris in numerous interviews. I'm well aware of her information. One other point, were there no Carson supporters in any of these caucuses to stand up and rebut the allegation that he was dropping out? Where were the Carson people? They seem to have been invisible.
Well, most of the Carson people fell for the hoax. They couldn't, the Carson's campaign manager couldn't get the message out there. Everybody was already distributed all across the state. They were calling people as fast as they could, trying to scotch the rumor. But once it was out there and being tweeted by CNN, everybody believed it, including a lot of Carson's own people.
Well, wasn't CNN the originator of that story, and the Cruz people just tweeted it out?
No,
why
the story.
Were the Carson people able to overcome that by tweeting themselves?
Well, I'm sure they tried to, but you know that a lie can get around the globe 3 times before the truth can get out of bed. Everybody was carrying it forward, and they were on the floor at the caucuses, which limited how much they could play with their electronic devices. And it's a major, it's a dirty trick, is basically what it is. Ted Cruz is campaigning dirty, and the election only just got started. Okay?
No, it's not okay, but you keep rationalizing the defeat, Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, I sort of figured this. Oh, no, wait. Cruz supporter, obviously. All righty, now then. Former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown is going to endorse Donald Trump at a rally 1 week before the state's presidential primary. So Trump is continuing to pick up endorsements. good for him. Now, Donald Trump made a very interesting prediction that John Kerry is hoping that he will be asked to step in and be the Democratic candidate if Hillary Clinton is arrested. Apparently, the Democratic leadership doesn't like Bernie Sanders any more than the GOP leadership cares for Donald Trump. And we know that Biden said he wasn't going to run. Now he's walking around, everybody saying, I regret that decision. So Biden and Kerry are both kind of waiting in the wings for something to happen to Hillary Clinton and come on in and save the day. Now, the reality is Hillary Clinton should already have been given her perp walk in handcuffs to jail long before now because of that June 17th, 2011 email in which Hillary instructed her subordinate, Jacob Sullivan, to strip the classification markings from a document and send it non-secure. Now, it doesn't matter by how much the document was classified or even if Sullivan did it or not. The giving of the order by Hillary is a violation of Title 18, Section 793. It is a felony. Why hasn't Hillary been arrested and charged for at least this crime? Because the Clintons know where all the dead bodies are buried in Washington and how they got to be dead bodies. So, anyway, there's another stink building up now regarding an aide to Hillary Clinton. And it's about Cheryl Mills, who interfered with a Freedom of Information Act request back in 2012, which, had it gone through, would have exposed the private Clinton email server years before Trey Gowdy found it. They knew it was a problem. They were actively trying to hide this server from the Congress. And so now Senator Grassley is out there saying we need to talk to Cheryl Mills. Gee, I wonder where she is. Maybe she got really depressed over the weekend. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And it's kind of funny. First of all, the good news is the suspicions about the Iowa caucuses being phony are all over the independent media. This is going viral. Corporate media is still trying to pretend this didn't happen. But it's going to be kind of hard to not report it when you have Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders up there themselves saying, yeah, something happened. We don't know exactly what, but something happened. Now, the other side that we're seeing is there are all these articles coming out from these militant feminists screaming, how could Bernie Sanders tie with Hillary Clinton? It's a disaster for women. They're going to take away our education. They're going to make us work for pennies. They're going to keep us all barefoot and pregnant. They're frothing at the mouth over there. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Zach in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing? Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you.
I was just wondering if you had any idea about, going back in the past to September 11th. Do you think any of these politicians that are running now have any influence in 9/11?
Yeah, certainly the Clintons. They were part of that core structure. I mean, they were buddy with the Bushes that whole time, and each one is as they handed the White House off to each other back and forth, they each kept reinforcing each other's policies. So, I mean, that's the core.
Donald Trump owns some of the buildings as well, and so I'm pretty surprised that I would be surprised if he hadn't had an insurance policy out on the towers.
Well, whether he did or not, we don't know. But you need to understand the Bush family and the Clinton family are very tight with the Central Intelligence Agency. Trump is more of an outsider. He's not considered one of the Olympians, so to speak. So I think Trump's awareness of how buildings are built is probably going to make him suspicious about what happened on 9/11. But again, I think that Trump thinks most Americans are not ready to hear an alternative view of what happened on 9/11. And he is playing politics. He's trying to walk a very fine line of telling the American people what he's really thinking, but he knows that there are a couple of lines he dare not cross, and I think that's where he's going. But certainly the Hillary Clinton is definitely tangled up with that whole group that did 9/11, which includes the Bush family, the CIA, and the Mossad.
All right, thank you.
All right. So we're going to let you go here. Now then, earlier today, the Board of Elections in Illinois has declared Ted Cruz a natural-born citizen and eligible to be on the ballot. There was a lawsuit filed saying, take him off the ballot, he's not a natural-born citizen. And the Illinois board said, yeah, we think he is. And, of course, Ted Cruz is running it all over the country saying, see, I'm a natural-born citizen, the state of Illinois has said so. But if you read what they actually said, first of all, the Board of Elections in Illinois did not use the phrase natural-born citizen. They said that Ted Cruz meets the citizenship requirements to be on the ballot. And that's all. They did not make any statements, nor could they, legally, declaring Ted Cruz eligible to hold the office of the presidency. Because they can't. It's in the Constitution. But the attitude from Ted Cruz's backers is Constitution, we got to use Cruz to get rid of Trump so that Cruz can lose to Hillary. At that point, his citizenship doesn't matter. Have you got the plan yet? Get rid of Trump, run Hillary against Cruz, and Hillary will be the president. They really are replaying Richard Nixon's re-election campaign strategy. Now, Cruz's campaign chair has quit up in the Washington state, and he's resigning. State Representative Graham Hunt had to step down yesterday because somebody blew the story that he had made some exaggerations about military decorations he'd won in his official biography. And it's a big stink, and it's coming out now because, even lower-level politicians are running for re-election this year. And so he's had to step down. So a man is known by the company he keeps. By the way, somebody posted Hillary Clinton's letter that she wrote and signed to Chaim Saban, promising that she would do everything as president she could to shut down the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, for which she received a handsome sum of money. Now, boycotts are a recognized form of peaceful, nonviolent protest protected by the First Amendment. So that piece of paper with Hillary's signature on it is her promise to take away your First Amendment rights in exchange for money. And that tells you all you need to know about Hillary Clinton as a potential president, what she's going to be doing, what she's going to be like. Now, another story, this is coming out of Sputnik News, reminding us all that Hillary Clinton destabilized Libya. Remember, she was Secretary of State. This was her war. And went in there and she said, we came, we saw, he died, and cackled like the Wicked Witch of the West. But basically, documents have surfaced, including many of the emails from her server, saying that Libya was destroyed so the West could economically exploit the country. We already know they wanted to get rid of the golden arm. And it's a very simple model. The U.S. goes on in, blows up the place, and then offers to loan them the money to rebuild at interest. That's it. We put up a flashback video of the under oath testimony of a computer programmer who confirmed computers are used to rig elections, and he himself had worked for a company and been paid to write such software. And again, hacking democracy, and we put a link up to that documentary on the page late yesterday, should still be on the front page. Anytime you have any kind of electronics involved, it's wide open to rigging. Because the companies that make these electronic voting machines claim their software is proprietary and may not be inspected. What's so secret about, is the button pushed, add 1 to this register? If you want to use computers to carry elections, it's got to be open source and publicly managed. It has to be fully transparent. When you have these private companies making these machines, nobody knows what's inside them. Bev Harris was very fortunate that, owing to a stupid mistake by the Diebold people, the source code and software for their GEM system was publicly available. And that's how they found that the Diebold election machines had 12 different ways you could go on in and change the outcome of an election and not leave a trace. Bev actually did a video where she had a trained monkey that they trained to go through and change the results of an election. It's that easy to do. Now, somebody pointed out the GOP, even though they detest Donald Trump and they don't want him, their current fundraising letters are going on out using Donald Trump's image. Say, Trump is out there and we need your money. But, of course, any money that you send to the Republican National Committee isn't going to go to Donald Trump. It's going to go to Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and various GOP Senate campaigns. It's another piece of dirty dealing going on out there. Now, there's a new event coming up on the horizon, so to speak, and it involves a lawyer, Montgomery Blair Sibley. And back in 2008, he was the lawyer of the D.C. Madam, Deborah Jean Palfrey. And apparently, he has got her little black book. And he's announced he's getting ready to release it and says it will have a bearing on the current election. Now, for what it's worth, longtime listeners know I had Deborah Jean Palfrey on my talk radio show shortly before she died, and she stated emphatically that if she turned up dead, it would not be a suicide. And I don't think it was. There have been too many convenient suicides surrounding our top politicians. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're finishing up on politics before we get into the hardcore economy here. Interesting little story coming out of WSMV. Reporter Alana Otler was on live TV challenging an election official, Election Board Chairman Ron Buchanan, with the top election official in Nashville, about his rather lavish spending of party funds on what seemed to be personal luxuries for him. Very expensive dinners, office furniture, $614 picture frame. And Buchanan responded by calling her a bad name on air that rhymes with itch, and then had to resign. Too many people in this system who are thinking with their egos and not with their brains. Apparently, according to the story over here in Investment Watch blog, 1/3 of all Super PAC donations are coming from Wall Street. They take your money away from you, and then they use it to buy your government out from under you and your entire nation. Another story from PatriotRising.com. Big bucks, shadowy companies, election mystery money returns. Now, what they mean by the mystery money is money that is coming through shell corporations or from nonprofits that don't have to disclose their donors. It's very easy to set up a corporation, just some paperwork, a few $100s. And then you can set up a bank account, and you can put money in there, and you can send a donation to a candidate that says, I'm coming from the Wiffle Fluff Corporation, and nobody knows who's really behind it. And these people who are pouring these huge amounts of money into the campaign obviously have a reason to conceal from you who they are. All right, turning over to the war zones. There are right now 6,500 coalition troops inside Iraq. The new invasion of Iraq is well and truly underway, but trust us, they're all just trainers and advisors. Really, they're not actually in combat. And the Pentagon is saying they have to have more, because they want to take back all the land on which ISIS is operating. And it's only a coincidence that ISIS is camped out over all those oil fields. And of course, what will happen is the U.S. will grab those oil field regions and cut Iraq's government out of the oil business from that point. Now, do you remember back that whole Jeffrey Epstein scandal? Jeffrey Epstein, very wealthy man, had his own little private orgy island down in the Caribbean where all of the world's elites were coming on down. And the island was filled with all these underage girls who were paid to be there and provide massages, so they say. And Bill Clinton was down there. A lot of other luminaries were named to be down there, including the British royalty. And basically, Jeff Epstein got a wrist slap for it. And the records were all sealed. The victims of the crimes were not even informed what happened. And that was basically it. Sweetheart deal. Except there's been a new lawsuit filed by the victims who now want to depose members of the attorneys, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, FBI agents. They want to depose them to find out if there was some kind of favoritism going on where this man who was guilty of multiple counts of statutory rape got a walk. And this is very, very bad timing for the Clintons because it's going to be one more reminder of the moral character or absence thereof of the Clinton family. Back in Iraq, the Iraqi army continues to make remarkable advances in Fallujah, killed the senior ISIS commanders. The U.S. is in a race. If they can't get back into Iraq and Syria quickly, it's all going to be over. It's all going to be over. We're coming in to get ISIS. ISIS is gone. Go home. We don't need you. Now, up in Afghanistan, they're pretty much on the brink. Their economy's in a shambles. Their infrastructure is destroyed. Their installed U.S. puppet regime is on the verge of collapse. And it cost you, the American taxpayer, $100 billion with a B dollars, supposedly for reconstruction efforts, most of which turned out to be phantoms. We were reporting earlier in the week how at least $100 million vanished that was supposed to be building schools and paying for teachers and teaching students, and the schools didn't exist. No teachers had been hired. The money just went away. And there is so much of that going on in all of these war zones. It's just a big get-rich-quick at the expense of the American people game going on. So, since it worked out so well in Afghanistan, we're going to do it again in Iraq, Syria, and Iran. Because nothing succeeds like success. Over in Yemen, things are not going very well for Saudi Arabia, which is acting as the U.S. proxy to teach those Yemeni people that you do not kick out your U.S.-imposed puppet ruler from 2 years ago. Bad things will happen to you. But apparently Yemen missiles are raining down on the Saudi forces in Jizan and Asir provinces. So it's not going well for Saudi Arabia right now. And as you know, Saudi Arabia's government is very unstable. There are reports of a potential military coup to change who is going to inherit the throne when the current king either dies of natural causes or is encouraged along. And the people of Yemen are very, very angry because, once again, Saudi warplanes are bombing children in Sana'a. They're committing war crimes. They're trying to punish and terrorize the people into agreeing to be slaves. We're going to go ahead and grab a phone call here. Glenn in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Ooh, I'm a Saudi prince. Pick me. I'm a Ferrari.
I wouldn't want the job.
No, it's there's a cast of thousands of those people anyway.
You know, 'cause then I'd actually have to figure out how to solve all the problems, and there are just simply too many.
Yeah, exactly. What I actually called about, Mike, was Cruz. At the top of the hour, last top of the hour news break, they had the story on about Cruz grousing about Trump's tweets, you know, complaining about wanting a recount and all that sort of thing. And Cruz chided Trump for using Twitter, you know, like we need a president, not a Twitterer or something like that. And but then he went on to say, he went on to imply that Troop had you know, a peevish temper, and he wasn't like the kind of man who should have his finger on the proverbial button, and that, you know, he might wake up one day and find him having a hissy fit and then nuking Denmark. And I thought, man, how amazingly hypocritical. Trump complains about potential vote fraud, and Cruz responds with defamatory allegations of being a genocidal maniac.
What else is he going to say? What else is Cruz going to say? Cruz is not going to go along with a recount. They're not going to go along with any kind of a verification system. All he can do is hurl ridicule and abuse to try and silence Trump. And I'll tell you this, Trump ain't going to do it. You know, Trump is not going to be shouted down by saying, oh, you're peevish. Why are you using Twitter? Well, Cruz is using Twitter. He's got a huge Twitter presence.
Right. I don't want...
Cruz used Twitter to tell everybody that Ben Carson was stepping down.
Exactly. Well, I don't want a man who, cheats and listens. I don't want a man who is defamatory who horrifically mischaracterizes and defames other people with his finger on the button.
I don't want a man in the White House who isn't supposed to be there under the Constitution, because Ted Cruz was born in Canada, and if he is willing to ignore the Constitution to run for the office of president, he will ignore the Constitution should he win. And that right there is a reason not to support him or vote for him. But don't worry, if you don't vote for him, somebody will vote for him on your behalf, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's in Congress to me that the things people will say in defaming other people's character, like that one pair on the radio that talked about inviting Alex Jones to a punch-up, and shooting him. I mean, it's like, don't you people understand that the things they're saying in retort are horrific? They're the morally reprehensible ones.
Yeah, there are, but the corporate media is definitely on Cruz's side. We've seen that for months now. It really is. It's going to be a fist fight. It's going to be a knockdown, drag-out election. I got to let you go. We've got to take a break for our top of the hour news and commercials. Thank you for the call, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And once again, the House of Representatives tried to pass a measure to derail the Iran nuclear deal. Why? Because Bibi Netanyahu told them that's what they've got to do. Now, Congress passed a number of bills, including the repeal of Obamacare, which was vetoed. And they did it kind of as an exercise for people to make speeches about this year, because they knew Obama was going to veto it. And they're out there saying, if we get a Republican president, we can take back Obamacare, which has been an absolute unmitigated nightmare for the American people. The fine this year for not having an Obamacare compliant insurance policy is $695. The premiums on the Obamacare compliant policies have gone through the roof, and all the affordable ones have been canceled. And then you are presented with a new selection of Obamacare compliant health insurance policies at 3 times the price. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Terry in Oregon, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. I was just looking over the U.S. Constitution, and there's only a couple sentences in there about natural born citizen. In fact, only one sentence on that, but it doesn't describe what it is.
They didn't need to describe what it was. It was already established in a number of documents, including the Law of Nations. And if you go back, and in fact, we just put up another story there talking about the debate over natural born citizen, in which Madison basically said where somebody is born has a higher priority over who their parentage is when it comes to who's going to be president of the United States. Now, the requirement for a president to be natural born was put in the Constitution by Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Jay, who wrote out that the goal was to make sure that the commander-in-chief of the American military was somebody who was born inside the United States and therefore loyal to the United States. You know, the Constitution does not exist in a vacuum. It was written with an eye to existing established laws and definitions.
Right. And, well, what about Rubio? He was born in the United States.
He was born in the United States, and you know, that one seems to be gray because of his parentage, but looking at that constitutional amendment and looking at what Madison wrote, his parentage may not be an issue. But Rubio's kind of running a distant third place, so I'm not concerned about him right now. But right. Ted Cruz absolutely is not a natural-born U.S. citizen. Under the laws of nations, under the writings of Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Jay, under Madison's commentary on that. You know, Ted Cruz's people are trying to take the Constitution as if that's the only thing the Founding Fathers ever wrote on the matter, and it isn't. The Constitution is surrounded by a huge body of written work, analysis, and thought, and debate. And I just put up another article that goes into it with even more sources from back at the time of the writing of the Constitution saying, this is what it means. I mean, George Washington had a copy of the Law of Nations in his personal library when he died, which turned out to be a hideously overdue library book that he borrowed and never turned back. Okay?
And that's on your website, right, Mike?
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and pop it up to the top again because, you know, everybody seems to want to get in on this. But natural born was defined in the law of the time as born inside the United States of America. There have been 4 U.S. Supreme Court decisions that have addressed the issue of what does natural born mean, and all of them said, yeah, born inside the country. Okay?
I'll check that out.
All right, I'm going to put that back.
Just one quick thing. You had that Jewish guy on yesterday. I couldn't understand him very well.
Well, his English is not very good. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, but did he say that the left, like Democracy Now and the guy from MIT, those are the problem?
He's basically saying they're controlled opposition. In other words, they'll be critical of Israel, but not to the point where Israel suffers any particular harm, as opposed to other voices who are saying things that would undermine Israel's entire legitimacy. That's what controlled opposition is. If you want to win a debate, if you're in control of both sides of the debate, then you decide the final outcome.
Right, so they control Chomsky and Amy Goodman.
Well, Amy Goodman gets a lot of funding from certain circles, which constrain what she's going to have on her program. Other people, work along with Israel out of a sense of racial or religious loyalty. It's not like somebody's come on in and threatened Noam Chomsky do this. Noam Chomsky wants to support Israel to the exclusion of all other considerations.
Really? Okay, I didn't realize that. That's enlightening. Okay, Mike, I'm going to let you go. You got to call us on the line. You got the news coming up, so I'll talk to you some other time.
All right, you got it. Thanks an awful lot. And I just reposted the Natural Born page to my website. But you're going to want to come back in later because I just got sent a whole new batch of supporting material on what natural born means. Born inside the country. Okay? And I don't care what Illinois says. Ted Cruz is not eligible to hold the office of president. Of course, if his real job is to take the nomination away from Trump and then lose to Hillary, then his citizenship isn't a problem, is it?
Right. That's why they make these donations to, like, the low candidate to get them as the opposition to Hillary. In other words,
Yeah, they're replaying Richard Nixon's re-election campaign. They really are. Okay?
Exactly. Okay, Mike, thank you. Bye.
Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, getting on back to the international scene, article coming out of, I'll have an IP address. I don't have the domain name here. Basically, there was an interview being done looking at Obama's State of the Union address, attempting to fabricate a foreign policy that was returned to the Cold War. And analysts have been looking at the reaction of the American people since then, and it isn't there. Americans are not siding with Obama on this hostility toward Russia. And this goes all the way back to what I was saying about The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and how for a ruler to prevail in a war, he has to have two things. He actually has to have more than that, but these are the two critical ones. He has to have a military that believes in the moral rightness of the war, so that they will fight fiercely and, if necessary, die. And he has to have a civilian population that believes in the moral rightness of the war, so that they will bear the burdens war brings without complaint. The federal government has neither of those. And that's why it is so reckless and foolish for them to be continuing this war agenda. But I understand why they're doing it. And it's more than just greed. If they quit now, they're looking at war crimes charges in The Hague. So they're thinking, we have to fight it all the way through, and we have to prove victorious, and that way we can get away with our war crimes. Because only the losers get prosecuted for war crimes. And unfortunately, I think the U.S. is going to lose this one here. Now, Sarah Palin, of course, came on out supporting Trump and made the usual spectacle of herself. And I noticed she's not really showing up all that much anymore. And she was talking about her son's domestic abuse charges and claiming it was PTSD, and how the current government wasn't taking care of military people properly, which is true. But there's a little bit of a wrinkle, because it turns out Palin's son was never actually in combat. Why does he have PTSD? It's another example of these career professional politicians. They'll just say whatever they think is going to get you to give them your money or your vote. That's it. They don't even care anymore. And by the way, I love that video, that 13-minute video of Hillary contradicting herself and then trying to explain why it wasn't really a contradiction. When I said black over here and white over here, really my core belief is gray. And anybody who says anything else, it's just a big nothing burger. You know, I guess they gave up trying to revive the vast right-wing conspiracy. Now it's it's a nothing burger. Jeez. Who do they get to write this nonsense? Okay, Obama wants to quadruple military spending in Europe ostensibly to counter Russian aggression. And more about that when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, before we went to the commercial break, we're talking about how Obama wants to quadruple U.S. military spending in Europe to counter Russian aggression, of which there has been none. The United States is doing all the aggressing. Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Syria. List is far from complete. I've lost count of how many places the U.S. is committing war and mayhem and regime change and drone strikes in. The U.S. is clearly the aggressor, but we're going to spend 4 times as much money in Europe. And not too surprisingly, there's an article over in Sputnik News saying this is not about security. Russia knows they're not invading Europe. It's about putting more money into the cronies' pockets back in Washington, D.C. And if you look at that huge scandal coming out of Afghanistan, $100 billion in there, and they have no idea where a large amount of it went. That's what's going on. They're looting and plundering the U.S. Treasury, putting it in their pockets. The ship of state is sinking. They're grabbing the silverware and heading for the lifeboats. Remember what Eisenhower said about the military-industrial complex. Humanity hanging on a cross of iron, and that's exactly where we are. Now, the Secretary of Defense, Ashton Carter, has announced how he's going to waste about $500 billion, including projects inside what is called the Strategic Capabilities Office, or the SCO, which is a murky and very wasteful corner of the Pentagon, where they have some of the dumbest, most likely to fail projects. Second only to DARPA. DARPA's come out with some neat things, like the internet, but they've had some really dumb ideas too. And they love to throw money away at these things, because it's not their money, it's your money. By the way, latest update from the world of the dismal failure called the F-35. Apparently the Pentagon can't actually check the maintenance on the existing F-35 aircraft because of an insecure database. Apparently there's some security problems with the Lockheed Martin database. Lockheed is already building these jets, and they don't know if they're actually going to work in combat, which means if they put them into combat and something isn't working, they're going to have to go back and refit, patch, hack, add a new attachment to all these aircraft. It's a very dumb way to build a weapons system, because your end result is going to be a bloated piece of junk with all the extra, we had to bolt this on because we forgot it in the design. And apparently they can't even track the maintenance on the jets that are already built because of this database issue. Is this any way to run a war? You betcha. We're seeing more and more high-level voices from within the American military joining the chorus that it is time for women to register for the draft. And we're not talking secretaries or ferry pilots or anything like that. We're talking about young women going into combat. And, hey, feminists, you got what you wanted. Total equality with the men. Now, I have an issue. First of all, I'm opposed to war. I'm opposed to young people fighting these wars that the old people want. I think if the old people want the war, give them the rifles, parachutes, send them in. Put them in an arena with chainsaws and broadswords. Whoever comes out gets all the goodies. The rest of us get to stay at home. But I have an issue with putting women into combat, and I'm not saying that they're not going to be the equal of men, especially in any mechanized field, Navy, Tank Corps, Air Force. You know, infantry, yeah, the average woman can't carry as much equipment as the average man, and that is just a fact of life, and all the political correctness in the world isn't going to change that. But when you go through a war, and you come out the other side, you need to be thinking about rebuilding your economy, and that means rebuilding your population. And the hard reality, and I know I'm going to get a lot of hate email from this, is when you're talking about creating the next generation of workers and taxpayers, the guy's contribution is a few minutes. The woman's contribution is 9 months. If you start putting your women into combat roles and they are getting killed, and your other side is not, they are going to rebuild their population and economy faster than you will. It's a very poorly thought out plan. They're just pandering to the feminists on this one. Now, as you probably heard on the SRN news break, Korea is getting ready to launch a scientific satellite into orbit, which they have the right to do. Nobody's got gates on outer space. Korea has announced it. They've turned over the two-line element set of where they're hoping this thing is going to wind up, so everybody knows where it is and can stay out of the way. But of course, the war hawks are out there saying, this is really a test of a military missile. Well, I got a news flash for you guys. During America's space program, those were all military missiles. The first rocket actually built for nothing but space exploration was the Saturn V. The Redstone and the Atlas used in Mercury were nuclear weapons delivery platforms. The Titan II used in Gemini was a nuclear weapon delivery platform. Same thing with the Russian program. The R-7 rocket was originally built to throw nuclear weapons around the globe. And because Russia couldn't miniaturize their nuclear weapons the way the U.S. could, they built larger rockets, which is why they had the upper hand in the early space race. They could put more weight up there. North Korea has a right to launch a scientific mission, and if they're using a modified military missile, big deal. So does everybody else. But Japan is saying they're going to shoot this down. If North Korea launches this space mission, Japan is going to shoot it down. That will be an act of war. Do you see how desperate they are to get a world war going, to duck the blame for the coming economic meltdown? It's really obvious. They're hoping if they can get a bloody war going with Korea and China and Russia that we'll all forget about the corruption and the mismanagement. We'll throw a snappy salute at the flag and fling our babies onto the designated enemy's bayonets. Because, hey, that worked twice before. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008. And now they're talking about drafting our daughters into combat roles. Isn't that neat? It's cool. It's going to be fun. Forget all about the homeless problem and the poor drinking water and the crumbling infrastructure. We're going to have ourselves a war, and it's going to be great. They'll be making movies and songs about this thing for decades to come. I really do think we ought to take everybody who's in favor of a new world war and put them right on the front lines with their families. They used to do that in the old days. Had people like Napoleon or Alexander the Great or the Caesars, they were right at the front of their troops. Eisenhower was there in the thick of battle. That's why he became one of our most anti-war presidents ever. Unlike these lead from behind, war is great as long as I get to stay here in my bunker. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And I'm having some very dedicated listeners. They're continuing to send me all these legal documents that are reinforcing over and over and over and over again. Natural born means born inside the United States. Now, I remember when this was an issue for John McCain, the issue was the Canal Zone really a part of the United States? And that was never resolved. But there's no question. Ted Cruz was born in Canada. Period. End of discussion. And what should be alarming is that Cruz and all of his supporters are willing to ignore the Constitution to run their candidate for office, which means that were he to win, he would continue to ignore the Constitution, and we've had enough of that over these last several administrations here. All right, turning to the economy, German banks have lost $14.2 billion with a B pounds over the last 90 days. And it's a strain on the entire European Union. We were always looking at the predations of the European Central Bank ultimately being the demise of the EU before the migrant crisis accelerated the process. But that's still out there. Now, our U.S. markets followed the Asian markets deeply into the red earlier in the day, and then all of a sudden, the flash of light and a cloud of dust and a hearty, where's the cash? The plunge protection team rode on in and drove that Dow back into the green so they could say, see, the economy's doing just fine. No, it isn't. The market's hideously overvalued, and every time they come on in with some new, instantly created money to rescue the Wall Street money junkies again, it diminishes the value of the money you already worked for and put in your pocket, put in your savings account if you're still dumb enough to have it in the bank, or buried in the mayonnaise jar out behind the pineapple plantation. They are, in a very real way, stealing from you to keep their little game going a little bit longer. Story coming out of Blacklisted News, how the federal government helped hide the investigation into big banks' money laundering for drug cartels. And a federal judge ruled last week that the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation, HSBC, will be forced to share a report on its business practices with the public, which includes money laundering for drug cartels and terrorist groups. HSBC is trying to hide it. And at the time, Assistant Attorney General Larry Brower argued the Justice Department had looked at the collateral consequences to prosecuting the HSBC or taking away its U.S. banking license. Such a move would have cost thousands of jobs. So basically, coming from the Assistant Attorney General, they continued to do business with a bank that was laundering drug and terror money at a time when they knew it was laundering drug and terror money. Because, hey, we're making cash, we're making money, and that's a good thing. And that's the only priority in the federal government right now. Keep this little Ponzi scheme central bank alive until somebody else is in office to take the blame. Lloyd's Banking Group is warning staff there are going to be 1,755 layoffs. Nearly half of the cuts are to branch members at Halifax. Ford is cutting hundreds of jobs in Great Britain and Germany in an attempt to save $200 million a year. This will drive their stocks up. When companies let workers go, their profit goes up, the stock price goes up, except that without workers, they can't sustain it. They're basically strip mining their own companies. Wells Fargo is dealing with a huge exposure to oil and gas companies, which are being hammered as an after effect of this misguided attempt to weaponize oil prices as a tool against Russia. And Russia suffered harm, but their economy is resilient because they've got good manufacturing, good agriculture, people want to buy their products, and it came back on Europe, Canada, the United States, South America. Much worse. And now all these Wall Street banks that extended loans to the oil and gas development, especially the fracking industry, they're in serious trouble. Now, over in Great Britain, and this comes under the heading of, is there nobody in government who actually thinks these things through? Because London has just passed a new law that will fine homeless people £1,000 for sleeping outside or what they call loitering, being on the street. What are they going to do? Beam up to the Starship Enterprise? If they don't have a home, they have to be somewhere. And let's be honest, if the homeless had £1,000, they wouldn't be sleeping in the streets. They'd get a hotel room, go over to the Y or something. So what's going to happen is these homeless people are going to be hit with these fines. They can't pay it. They're going to be arrested and thrown in prison for not paying the fine, which will give them a bed, a roof, and 3 meals a day. So why not just give the homeless a bed, a roof, and 3 meals a day and save all the legal and policing costs? All these governments that are passing laws against the homeless, where are they going to go? Especially here in Hawaii, we got a major homeless problem here. What are they going to do? Walk back to the mainland? Take a step, come up for air. Take another step, come up for air. Take another step, come up for air. Right now, all they're doing about the homeless in Hawaii right now is just keep them away from the tourists. And it is an exploding problem. My wife and I went down to Hilo over the weekend to visit some relatives that we're probably not going to get a chance to see again for a long time. And we had been in Hilo about 3 years before. And this year, it was just amazing. Depressing how many homeless people were out there. And, you know, we did what we could. Wasn't enough. What's the government going to do at some point? Say it's open season on the homeless for all you psycho killers on prescription and antidepressants. You know, if you shoot a homeless person, nothing will happen. Just like they tell the cops, shoot a U.S. citizen, nothing will happen. These people have got nowhere to go. Our tourism industry has drastically reduced ever since TSA got out here to grope and fondle everybody. This is not wise and prudent government. This is hysterical plundering, grabbing everything they can on the way to the exits. Over in France, farmers are once again demanding the lifting of anti-Russian sanctions. Because before this whole let's start a new war nonsense got going, the world was engaged in peace through commerce, and French farmers were selling a lot of their product to Russia. And everybody was happy, except the war hawks. And the sanctions have brought tremendous misery and economic harm to France. The sanctions against Russia did not happen in a vacuum. The sanctions against Iran did not happen in a vacuum. They had blowback, serious blowback. And the French they're fed up with this nonsense, the new Cold War. They want to go back to business. They want to make things, grow things, and sell things. What is wrong with that as a world model? Now, getting on to the immigration situation, apparently the federal government is going to cut back on monitoring the border with Mexico from the air, citing cost cuts. They're reducing aerial surveillance on the Texas-Mexico border. Hey, we're welcoming all these illegals in anyway to blend all the populations together, to blend all the cultures together. But of course, if you're a legal American citizen, you still get the going over by the TSA when you travel. But the refugees and the illegal immigrants, they're getting a better deal from the government than the legal American citizens. And that is not wise and prudent government either. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And talking about immigration, the number of sanctuary cities in the United States of America has just crossed the 300 mark with the addition of Dallas and Philadelphia. And they're basically just trying to pour all these people in and shake us all up so we forget who we are. They're trying to undermine our sense of a cultural, historical identity to make it more difficult for people to unite against the growing oligarchy. So, anyway. Apparently, a migrant party in Murmansk got out of control, but the Russians are a little less tolerant of shenanigans than people in Europe. 18 in the hospital, 33 in jail. Berlin is going to put 10,000 refugees in hotels. In hotels, $600 million to put these refugees up in a hotel. Hotels are cool. Got people come in cleaning up the place for you. Angela Merkel is in serious political trouble. Her popularity and support is in free fall following the announcement that Germany is estimating the total cost for absorbing all of these war refugees, many of whom are not actually war refugees, is going to come to 36 billion pounds with a B. Now, apparently over in Munich, police are hunting for a couple of migrant men. Actually, it was more than a couple. There was a group of migrant men who were groping a woman on the subway. You know, here, Fraulein, let me touch your Edelweiss or something. And two pensioners, two old guys, tried to stop them and save the women. And these migrants beat them up. And it was caught on the subway video camera, and the police are looking for them. So how's that let's blend everyone together into one formless mass with no identity idea working out for you globalists? And again, our own history of the United States during the heyday of immigration, when everybody wanted to come here and we had, not open borders. They still had to go through Ellis Island and get a medical check. But even then, they came in, they formed Little Italy, Chinatown, Little Tokyo, Koreatown. They would still enclave with their own cultural identity. And the refugees and immigrants being brought in are being intentionally blended into other neighborhoods. And it's causing friction. Remember, Obama, not too long ago, was saying he wanted a quota-based system for residential neighborhoods. That for every block there would be so many Mexicans, so many Chinese, so many this, so many that. They're trying to destroy our cultural identity, our historical identity. That's the reason for the attacks on the Confederate flag and other historical icons. Now, a lot of people were complaining about Israel, which is supporting this flood of migrants into Europe and the United States, but wasn't taking any themselves. So Israel said, all right, we'll take a few. And now it's come on out. This is reported in the IB Times. Israel is taking all the refugees that they've welcomed into their country, and they're forwarding them to other countries with secret deals. Hi, we don't really want this one. If you'll take them, we'll tell the Americans to give you some money or something. Now, over at Russia Today, there's an article which is basically confirming my suspicions about what's going on. Migration as a tool of ethno-engineering. That's the buzzword they're using. Ethno-engineering. They don't want Europe to be full of mostly Europeans. They don't want America to be full mostly of Americans. They want everything blurred so they can knock down the borders and declare their fascist New World Order. Barack Obama has come on out asking for $1.1 billion to cut heroin deaths in the United States. He wants $1 billion. Now, let's be honest. We know that's not what the money's really going to get spent on. It's going to be more payoffs to cronies because our government is involved in the heroin trade. We reposted those photos showing the opium in Afghanistan being protected, harvested, and transported by uniformed members of the coalition, including some with American flags on their shoulders. The biggest drug dealer in the country is the country. But they don't want you to know that. So Obama's going to take $1 billion of your dollars and just have it vanish into thin air and say, see, we're working on the problem of heroin deaths. Now this story's come on out. This is over in LatinTimes.com, confirming earlier reports that the Drug Enforcement Administration made a deal with the Sinaloa cartel to grant them immunity for their drug running in exchange for information on rivals. Now, what's really going on here is the U.S. government, primarily the CIA, which was up to its neck in guns and drugs during the Iran-Contra scandal during Vietnam, they're trying to set up a drug monopoly centered on the Sinaloa cartel, who, by the way, also got free guns from the Fast and Furious program. And what they're doing is they're wiping out the competition. The war on drugs is the war on the other guy's drugs, because when you have a monopoly, you can kick your prices up and make more money. Competition drives prices down. We can't have that in the modern United States of America. Competition's bad. Now, up in Oregon, there's been a development, and I find it very troubling. The headline on the story, as it appeared in the Western Journalism Center, is the Oregon protesters just made a huge announcement that will ratchet up the tension. But they mentioned this is a new group that just now showed up. They call themselves the Pacific Patriots Network. And they're up there making very inflammatory statements. And to me, it's a front group. It's a propaganda hoax. The people who were protesting against the Bureau of Land Management were just calm and cool and collected and making the legal points in the Constitution about what the BLM has been doing wrong. But that doesn't look good in the media for the government. So they send in this group of ringers to go on in there and scream about death to America and, So the media can look at them and say, see how crazy these people are who are standing up to the government? You don't want to listen to what they have to say. You know, after all these decades of studying the way the government lies to you, it becomes very obvious after a while. Now, we have another big stink brewing on down in Texas because a group of Texas ranchers were told by the Bureau of Land Management that the land that they have been living on and farming for 70 years is not really theirs. And the Bureau of Land Management's sole claim is the land shouldn't have been sold to them in the first place because it's federal government property. Because we have arbitrarily declared that, you know, all land this close to a given border is federal property and you shouldn't be there. And I would like to remind everybody, under the Constitution, the federal government is only allowed to own the land underneath federal buildings, federal infrastructure such as harbors, airports, and military bases. And the Founding Fathers put that in there to prevent the government from solving its self-made economic problems by plundering the property of the people, which is exactly what's going on. All right, we're going to try and grab a phone call real quick here before the top of the hour. Elizabeth in Connecticut, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi there, Mike. Thanks a lot for taking my call. I didn't get to watch the first hour, so I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure you touched on the whole Iowa fraud thing over and over again, which just basically, I think, demoralizes everybody because, you know, your vote doesn't count, but
it shouldn't demoralize you. It should anger you. We should all be furious. You know, we're waking up from the Matrix, where we were told that this was a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and all of a sudden we've been told, no, actually it's a government that's owned by the bankers in order to plunder and loot the people and make us all their slaves. We should be angry, not depressed, not discouraged. We should be red-eyed angry. Elizabeth, can you wait for the news and commercial break, and I'll come back to you?
Gladly. Thank you.
All right, we're going to put you back on hold. Take a break for news and commercials. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And we're going to go back to Elizabeth in Connecticut. And you had something else you wanted to share with us.
Yes. I have a couple of points I want to make, and I think this is what is attracting so many people to Trump. I mean, obviously, you know, the immigration issue. And my point being is that I'm a small business owner. Small businesses are being completely wiped out in this country, completely wiped out. Immigrants are coming in and they take our kids' jobs, our young kids' jobs. They like to say that, you know, illegal immigrants come and they do jobs that we don't want to do. That's not true. When I was a kid, and I'm sure when you were a kid, at 15, 16, we would be washing the dishes. I washed dishes. We would be cleaning.
I mowed lawns.
Yeah, exactly.
I cleaned out barns and attics and stuff when I was a kid. That was just normal.
And it's important for development. I mean, we have kids who are completely in their basements playing video games instead of developing character. So the immigration problem is deep. It's money, it's handouts that they get because they get handouts. They get free Medicare, and it's not right.
They're getting better treatment from the U.S. government than American citizens are, and that is absolutely wrong.
Yeah, it's insane. And, you know, we lived in New York City. We left because New York is intolerable, totally intolerable. I mean, a place you can't raise your children with any sort of safety or, I mean, it's filled with people. They like to say it's an immigrant city. It was, but prior to 1965 and that legislation, prior to that, most of the immigrants came from Ireland. Most of them came from Italy. They came from our culture. Of course, there were other people in other cultures, but mainly that was stipulated prior to 1965.
I think it's less cultural. I think it's less cultural than the idea that the current flood of people across our borders are coming in with a sense of entitlement. They have had their heads filled with all these promises of how great life is going to be if they make the trip. Some of the people going into Europe were told they're going to have free houses and free money. They're not getting it, and of course, you know, they're reacting like spoiled children. They made that very long, arduous trip, and at the end, you know, the pot of gold isn't there at the end of that particular rainbow, and they're acting out their rage and frustration.
Yeah, it's insane. And this is Black History Month, and I want to point out something. I saw one of your articles on what the treatment our white children are getting in colleges and universities across the country.
You know, if somebody went out and said, let's have a White History Month, they'd be denounced as racist.
Yeah. I know, but there's some college in Oregon or something out west has a white privilege month, and they've been sending our kids to white privilege camps to shame them. This is just unacceptable and intolerable.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree.
So, and then they get worried that there's a backlash. Well, of course there's going to be a backlash. There's going to be angry white folks saying, listen, we've had enough. And, you know, I'm all for everybody's heritage. I want to make sure everybody's good. But I mean, this is just beyond my comprehension. So
I mean,
having worked hard in this country.
If the Irish have a right to the Irish culture and the Mexicans have a right to their heritage, so do we. And that's the part that's gone wrong with it. And the reason it's all failing miserably is because the intellectual foundation that justifies political liberalism is firm in the belief that if you completely control the environment, you will re-engineer the human mind, because the human mind is born absolutely blank. And that was all based on Margaret Mead's Coming of Age in Samoa, which was a fraud. It was a book written to justify a political agenda, not to actually discover what's going on. And as a result, virtually every major liberal agenda program has fallen flat on its face, including this mass migration ethno-engineering.
Yeah, and I tell you, New York City, on top of the infrastructure falling apart totally and completely, it's almost like we're living in I don't know how to explain it. It's wacko. Nobody looks at anybody in the eye anymore. It's just, you're just walking in a sea of zombies.
Elizabeth, let me ask you a quick question. When did you leave New York?
5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
I have to go back in for various jobs. And so, you know, I go in there like once a month or so. And it just seems to be getting worse and worse, literally worse. Oh, it's filthier and filthier. De Blasio is not cleaning the streets. There's trash out on the streets constantly. It's just insane. And it's just, I can say anything. We keep going liberal. We keep going that this is what the rest of the country is going to look like.
Yes, it absolutely is. We're already descending into third world conditions in this country, including our elections. That display in Iowa on Monday was right out of third world, you know, corrupt banana plantation thinking.
Yes, and Cruz is unlikable, totally and completely. Have no comprehension how any one person could have ever voted for him, but that's just beyond my...
You mean you doubt Microsoft and Facebook that Cruz actually won?
There's one other thing out there, because Rubio is set to strike in New Hampshire, I'm sure, but the establishment wants him to come up. There's some rumors out there that he was doing some, I guess, male nude dancing a long time ago. There's some photos out there, too.
You know, I don't want to go there. I mean, I'm more concerned about Cruz's upbringing in all those Cuban casinos and everything. And by the way, his parents did not flee Castro's Cuba. They actually moved to Florida while Batista, the U.S.-backed puppet ruler, was still in power. That's a little bit of a lie. But if Rubio was a wild child in his youth, you know, I don't want to go there. I was a wild child in my youth, not quite that wild, but still, I mean, you know, youthful exuberance. I'm not going to take that as an issue unless he committed an actual crime, okay?
Okay. That's fair enough.
All right.
Like I said, I get worried that some of these things can be used to, you know, to control them. So if you have things that you're trying to hide, if you come out and you say it, that's one thing. But if you're trying to hide it, it's something that's other people
that can be used. But you know something? These kind of embarrassing things from your past are only useful as a tool as long as we go along with this idea that we should be shocked about certain things here. And that's, again, part of the control mechanism. And, you know, that, I don't care what Rubio was doing, you know, dancing, whatever. Unless he committed a crime or harmed somebody, then it's an issue. But if he's just having fun, you know, let him. I really don't care about that. Elizabeth, thank you very much. We're going to switch over here to Jesse in Ohio. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I was thinking earlier about the Oregon situation there. And if the deal is that the BLM wants to take the land for personal use of whatever it is that they're going to do, and so they've got the guys locked up who cannot ranch, farm the land, whatever it is they're doing there, and the protesters are all there to keep that from happening, why don't they take the place of the guys missing and keep the ranch thing going.
Well, because they're not actually on the ranch. They're in the headquarters building of the Wildlife Refuge. And if they were out there on the ranch, the Bureau of Land Management would chase them off the way they chased off the owners.
But isn't it their land? Couldn't they still do that?
No, but the Bureau of Land Management is saying it's their land.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're claiming ownership over this situation. And again, it's a violation of the Constitution, but the federal government has, gone off the constitutional reservation, which makes it an illegitimate government. It's a criminal government, and they're acting like it. Having the police steal from us under civil forfeiture, killing anybody who stands up and protests, it's a criminal government. They're involved in drug smuggling, at least going back to Vietnam days. It's a government of the criminals, by the criminals, and for the criminals. They're acting like the world's largest organized crime outfit.
Absolutely.
All right, well, listen, thank you very much, and we're going to grab Joe in California real quick. What's on your mind?
Hi, I wanted to call. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to mention that when everybody is taking a citizen's land, so like the BLM and so on and so forth, they're taking people's land and saying that they're not entitled to their land. And then at the same time, large oil companies who own land are able to take oil out of the ground and sell it and put all the profits in their pockets, yet the people who own land aren't allowed to even hoard drinking water or anything like that.
Yeah, it's called fascism. It's called fascism. All right, Joe, we got to take a commercial break. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to be back after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm going to go ahead and close the phone lines for the rest of the show. Normally, I wait till the last segment, but I got a lot of stuff I need to get through, and I hope you'll understand. I want to get to this stuff. Okay. From the world of Second Amendment rights, over the weekend out in California, a 92-year-old World War II veteran stopped a burglar with a legally owned firearm. Same thing happened up in Alaska. Good guy with a gun detained an armed robber, saved lives. Another story coming out of St. Louis. Elderly store clerk chases out armed robber with gun of her own. And over in Alabama, another armed citizen defends against thug shooting through jacket pocket. Funny how you never hear about this on the corporate TV news. You'll hear about all the bad things done with guns, but never when people thwart crimes. And here's a good reason. It is estimated that every year 1.6 million crimes are stopped in progress before they actually happen by ordinary citizens with legally owned firearms. They don't want you to know that. They want you to remain dependent on those police who may not show up for up to 20 minutes after you call 911. And we're hearing from some cities where they're out there saying, there's no guarantee we're going to get there at all. We're too busy writing traffic tickets and stealing people's property with civil forfeiture, and a cop has to have priorities, so you're on your own. But you better give up your guns here. Not surprisingly, gun sales have set a 9th monthly record in a row. People are arming up as well as they should. Soros is playing both ends. He's heavily invested in gun manufacturers, but he's also giving money to the gun grabber groups because he knows every time they open their yap, he's going to make more money on his investments in the arms companies. Now, down in Tennessee, they are getting ready to pass a law that is going to make the gun grabbers absolutely livid. It's a new law regarding gun-free zones. And the way it works is, if any shopping mall, movie theater, church in Tennessee puts up a sign saying gun-free zone, and you go on in there thinking it's a gun-free zone, and some wacko whose brain has been melted on antidepressants comes on in with a different attitude, and you get injured, you will be legally allowed to sue the owner of the premises for not enforcing the gun-free zone. I think that's a great idea because those gun-free zones don't work anyway. It's like an invitation sign to a giant open-air shooting gallery for the crazies and criminals. Come on in, nobody's going to shoot back at you. We're in an age right now where police departments across America, when they're not stealing your property under civil forfeiture or gunning innocent Americans down in the streets, in far greater numbers than terrorists and psychos on antidepressants, are openly admitting they cannot protect the public from criminals. The courts have backed up that the police have no obligation to save you from a violent crime. But you're supposed to give up your guns. There's a very bizarre case headed for the Supreme Court in which a state government declared that non-lethal weapons like zappers and pepper spray are not protected under the Second Amendment. And while they have to allow citizens to have guns, they can ban these weapons, even though they're non-lethal and they're used purely defensively. Nobody goes out and commits an offensive crime with a zapper or pepper spray. And it's absurd. And the Supreme Court is probably going to hear the case because it does involve the Second Amendment. But I already know how it's going to go. The United States Supreme Court ruled in United States versus Miller that the Second Amendment reserves to the American people the same weapons carried by the uniformed services. So if a police officer has a pepper spray, you're allowed to have a pepper spray. If a police officer is allowed to have a taser, you're allowed to have a taser. If a police officer has a 30-round magazine, you're allowed to have one as well. That's the Supreme Court precedent. They really want us all helpless. Remember that story came out of Europe where a girl defends herself from being raped by a migrant. She's in trouble because she was using a pepper spray, which is banned. Really. You should have just lied down there and let him rape you. That would have been the legal thing to do. And because you didn't, because you fought back, you're going to have to pay a fine. All right, let's talk about what's going on in Flint, Michigan. They had a story on Fox News just a little while ago. This is also not going away. The FBI is now coming in for some reason. They're getting involved in the drinking water investigation. Even though it doesn't cross the state line and it doesn't involve federal property, and I don't really think the FBI actually has jurisdiction, but they're waiting on in there to do whatever it is they're planning on doing. And it is starting to look a little bit murkier than the water itself because the city's former emergency manager, Darnell Early, who was serving as Flint's emergency manager from September 2013 until January 2015, which is when all this changeover of the water supply went down, has been subpoenaed by the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. But he's refusing to testify. He is not going to show up. And he's also resigned his office. So something is going on there. Residents of Flint, Michigan are bringing bottles of the brown water and clumps of debris found in the water to Washington, D.C. for the hearings. And it is an absolute scandal. Now, Governor Rick Snyder, to show how concerned he is about all of this, is proposing a partial refund on the water bills. You're only going to have to pay half as much to have your children poisoned and mentally crippled. Aren't we swell people? Now, about those hospital bills, Gov. And Snyder isn't fooling anybody with any of this because apparently he was having dinner at a restaurant at the Old Town Tavern on Liberty Street, and a crowd gathered and was screaming, "How was your water? Was it clean?" And they literally chased him out of the restaurant. It's amazing. Now, the other day, we were talking about one of the many special deals that were made about how General Motors got a clean water hookup. And today it came out why. General Motors was using the city water as part of their manufacturing process and discovered it was etching the engine blocks they were building. The water coming out of the faucets in Flint, Michigan was eating the engine blocks. And they wanted the people of Flint, Michigan to drink it. Now, when we come on back, as you know, I got myself a water testing kit. We've got the results. They're good. But I want to talk about water testing and how essential it is for you all to start doing the same. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're talking about water quality, which is obviously a concern to all of us, especially if we are bathing in that water. And the people of Flint were saying, bathing in the water, their skin would burn. Well, yeah, if it's able to etch an engine block over at General Motors, of course. So a lot of people are thinking it's time to stop taking the government's word about the safety of the drinking water and start running a test, and we decided to do that here. I wasn't expecting anything surprising. We do have good water here in Hawaii, but I went ahead and did it anyway. And the specific test kit I used is called the Water Safe City Water Test Kit. You can find it all over the web. It goes for about $20. It's a single test. You use up the entire kit for a single test of your water, but that's going to be good enough. And it tests for a lot of things. It tests, obviously, for lead. It's the reason I got it. Tests for the presence of pesticides. There's a nitrite and nitrate test. pH, hardness, chlorine, and finally a bacteria test. And not too surprisingly, the water here in Hawaii is perfect. Passed all the tests with wide margins except for the hardness. Was above the recommended level for hardness, which is more about wear and tear on the pipes and less about what's going on with you. And when you're sucking your water out from the inside of an extinct volcano, you should expect a high mineral content, so I'm not worried about that. But I think if you have any questions about your water at all, it's $20 is a good investment to find out what is in your water, if you need a filter, if you need to be buying bottled water, because it's not just Flint. Erin Brockovich is out there saying Flint is the tip of the iceberg, and she is absolutely correct. We already know about Sebring, Ohio, parts of New Orleans, Baltimore, Boston. There was that article in The Guardian where they have documentation that heavy metal content is being hidden. The severity of the problem is being hidden in every major city east of the Mississippi. And that doesn't let the West Coast off the hook. They just don't have paperwork on that, one way or the other. So if you feel like it, get one of these kits, do the tests, save the results and all the documentation in case you need to support later on. If everybody in your neighborhood does a test and you find out you are living in Flint, you're going to need that information to go to the city council and say, don't tell me what the water department says. These are the tests that we did ourselves. Have that information. I mean, these are well-known, established testing methods. There's nothing blue sky about them. So maybe we should go to the Hawaii Tourism Board. Come to Hawaii. You can drink our water. Remember that old Tom Lehrer song that he wrote for That Was the Week That Was about pollution? Need to bring that one back here. Absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Zika virus. There is some kind of a deception cover-up going on using numbers reported by the Associated Press. They were talking about 4,180 suspected microcephaly cases. Only 270 could be confirmed. And of those 270 cases, only 6 cases had the Zika virus. 6 out of 270, that does not document that Zika is the cause of the small brains and small skulls. And even the World Health Organization was saying, well, it hasn't actually been established, but we think it might be. Blame the Zika for your deformed babies. So something else seems to be behind this sudden surge in microcephaly cases. Something being covered up. Could be genetic engineering. Could be glyphosate. One thing that we do know is that this outbreak of this birth defect and the Zika outbreak are centered on the location where genetically engineered mosquitoes were released 3 years ago. So, what's going on? Well, something you might want to consider. We already know from previous cases that genetic changes to produce a specific result will also create unexpected and unpredictable side effects. Roundup Ready corn was genetically modified to make it tolerant to glyphosate. And then farmers discovered the corn stalks were much sturdier than the natural variety. Now, nobody set out to do that. It was an unintentional side effect of the modification, and the farmers have to put Kevlar belted tires on their farm equipment to prevent punctures. Now, every time a mosquito bites somebody, they leave behind saliva, which is what makes the bite itch afterwards. Now, what if that saliva has been changed by the modifications to the mosquitoes? What if it's developed into a toxic, harmful chemical that leads to the birth defect? Even more alarming, some scientists in Brazil believe the Zika virus has jumped species to the common mosquito, which could be a problem. Now, is it really a pandemic, or are we seeing a repeat of the big swine flu pandemic threat of 2009? Remember when they told us we were all going to die unless we bought Tamiflu? The World Health Organization actually lowered the threshold for the number of cases so they could say, we called it the when birds fly flu because it was a combination of pig, avian, and human virus, which we discovered later on was actually something that was being engineered at the CDC years before. But we called it the when pigs fly flu, and they were out there saying, see, it's a pandemic. It's over our recently adjusted threshold. And everybody was out there encouraged to buy Tamiflu, and Roche Pharmaceuticals made a ton of money. And it turned out that the when pigs fly flu was actually less serious than the normal seasonal flus. And then a study done in Great Britain revealed that Tamiflu was no more effective against the flu than over-the-counter paracetamol, which is their name for acetaminophen. It was all about making the money. But everybody's out there using Zika to push their agenda, and the population control people are out there are saying, don't have sex. It's sexually transmitted now. We know it's sexually transmitted. Don't have babies. They'll be deformed. And there's all kinds of very hysterical comments and claims being made out there. So many that, again, it does feel like it's a repeat of the 2009, let's scare everybody into buying Tamiflu and make a lot of money. Now, we don't know that it's not a threat, but I'm a little cautious about saying it is because of how many times we've been told something is a threat and it turns out not to be, like human-caused global warming. Fool me once, shame on you, and so forth here. They're concerned that Hawaii may see incidences of Zika because the species of mosquito that currently carries Zika also carries dengue, and we just went through a big dengue scare down on the Big Island. Now, that seems to be fading out. Because we were, obviously when we were down in Hilo, we were asking about that. Now, getting on back up to Chipotle, the Centers for the Disease Control have ended their case investigating the illness outbreaks at Chipotle. They can't find the source, where it came from. And more people are thinking that Chipotle's was the victim of industrial sabotage for going non-GMO. How dare you reject the mighty gods of Monsanto? We're going to have our Blackwater mercenaries have lunch at your place, and they're going to leave you a special surprise. And, of course, Chipotle's is now the subject of a broader criminal investigation. This is punishing Chipotle's for being non-GMO, for defying Monsanto. Like I said, our government is operating like it's an organized crime syndicate. You take our products, you sell them to the people, or bad things going to happen to you. It's amazing. All right, we're going to coming up here on another commercial break, and we're going to be talking about pharmaceuticals and human-caused global warming. We'll be right back after these words. Hello, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today here. We're going to start off with human-caused global warming. Earlier in the week, we were talking about the fact that snow has fallen south of Hanoi, Vietnam, for the first time anybody's ever heard about it. And today, we are getting word that the first ever snowfall has fallen on Okinawa Island, Japan. There's no record anywhere of snow being on Okinawa in human memory. Now, as you know, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration has come under severe criticism for coming out with a report insisting that 2015 was the hottest year on record, and there'd been no pause whatsoever in human-caused global warming. We're in a crisis. You must give us your money in obedience. You're all going to die. And there is a congressional investigation because the claims made by NOAA, which is funded with your tax dollars and ultimately answerable to you, really seemed very much out of touch with the experiences that we've all been going over these last few years. And Congress asked for the raw data, the methodology. NOAA said, absolutely not. Big stink. Judicial Watch filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and at that point, NOAA finally started sending information over to the Congress, grudgingly. Now, this last week, 230 scientists, spokespeople, signed a letter saying NOAA has clearly abandoned scientific principles here. It included a Nobel Prize winner, 2 Apollo astronauts. These are heavy hitters. And it basically reminds you that this idea that there's 99% of the world's scientists are in agreement with the theory of human-caused global warming is just another big, fat USDA choice pile of government bovine excrement. Now, Dr. John Christie was in the congressional hearings yesterday pointing out that the methodology of NOAA was deeply flawed. They were relying on ground temperature measurements from poorly sited locations and ignoring the satellite data, which does show there's actually been cooling. But NOAA said, no, we're not going to look at the satellite data. Everybody knows the world is warming. The satellites must be wrong. We're going to look at our thermometers here. And we have documented on my ClimateGate page that NOAA, first of all, shut down all their temperature measuring stations in the cooler rural parts of the country, citing budgetary restrictions, and they focused on temperature measuring stations located in the cities, which are very hot places. Air conditioning does not cool a building. It takes the heat inside the building and pumps it outside the building, which is where those thermometers happen to be. In fact, we've got photos of official NOAA temperature measuring stations located in the hot outflow of air conditioning units on buildings. Cities are warm places. It's called the urban heat island effect, and it doesn't represent the temperature of the entire world. We have one photo of an official NOAA temperature measuring station sited right next to a trash incinerator. NOAA relies on temperature measuring stations at all the nation's airports, where there are all these jets burning tons of carbon fuel and belching out all this hot gas around. And it's valid to give pilots the temperature of the air to calculate their takeoff and landing, but it doesn't represent the temperature of the greater metropolitan area. And Christie came on back and said, when a theory is contradicted by the observed facts, you need to change the theory. The world is not following the predictions of human-caused global warming. The models need to go back to the drawing board. Certainly that claim made back in 2000 that snowfalls are now a thing of the past was complete nonsense. And we have seen the global warming cultists keep coming up with excuses about, warm weather causes warm climate causes cold weather. The heat is hiding in the bottom of the ocean. And just all kinds of nonsensical things. So, Newsmax is reporting the fact that NOAA was caught tampering with their own statistics to sell this idea that global warming is real so that Obama can hit you with a carbon tax. Now, the good news is, as of the last polls, 91% of respondents don't think it's a real problem. They have a list of this people who signed this petition to the U.S. House Science Committee Chairman Lamar Smith to investigate NOAA for possible falsehoods. And there were 300 people. Signers included 25 climate or atmospheric scientists, 23 geologists, 51 engineers, 74 physicists, and 12 economists, plus the Nobel laureate and the 2 Apollo astronauts. How many more times are you going to have to be lied to before you accept the government lies to you about everything? In fact, they don't dare tell you the truth even once out of fear you might learn how to tell the difference. By the way, yesterday was Groundhog Day. I didn't get to it because we ran out of time here. And Punxsutawney Phil did not see his shadow and is predicting an early spring. I have a feeling that, once again, Punxsutawney Phil is going to be a little bit embarrassed. All righty, let's see. Very important question being asked over at RIF.com. When the government spends all this time surveilling you and me and tracking all this other stuff, why aren't they keeping track of how many people are killed by prescription drugs? It seems like they're completely uninterested in that. Fortunately, there is a website that is tracking that. It's called pharmadeathclock.com, and it lists American and European deaths of multiple causes, including medical mistakes, and these numbers are in the millions. But it makes money, so that makes it all right. Another article over in WakingTimes.com. Are you aware of Big Pharma's impressive records, which talks about the pharma death clock? Big Pharma is killing more people than all the terrorists and all the gun nuts on antidepressants, and even the civilian police all rolled together. The death toll is in the millions, but it makes money. Don't you understand? It makes money. Yeah, it makes it okay. You have to put up with a few million of your fellow citizens dying horrible deaths, because that's what makes life worth living, so forth and so on. Now, there's another article that came out of Blacklisted News. Congressional review of Turing Pharmaceuticals and Valiant Pharmaceuticals, showing how executives decided it was less trouble to go on out and buy the rights to medications and then raise the prices, like that guy did with that one medication. Apparently, it's now become a standard practice. They don't want to bother coming up with new medications anymore. They're going to use their wealth to buy drugs people are dependent on and just run the prices up. And they have no justification for running the prices up other than they know people have to buy these medications. And these people or their insurance are going to somehow pay for it. We included a link to a website called the National Vaccine Information Center, and it's basically a clearinghouse for a lot of these horrible problems that are coming up with these very recklessly developed and hastily sold products, and now they're trying to make them mandatory. The government is going to order you to inject your child with chemicals that may do him no good at all, may actually cause a lot of harm. Now, you've probably heard of Adderall. This is a drug prescribed for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which, as the creator of it admitted, is a completely fictitious disease invented to sell medications. Apparently, Adderall will inflict side effects including memory loss and permanent brain damage. It's extremely addictive. But it makes money, and that makes it okay. It's amazing here. All right, we're almost at the end of the show here, and I got a few things I'm going to have to leave off and take into tomorrow. We need to keep talking to everybody about the very obvious dirty playing in Iowa, because they're going to do it in New Hampshire. They're going to do it in South Carolina. They're going to do it in every state of the union. We have to be ready to point it out and say, hey, this candidate is cheating. So we'll be back tomorrow on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, aloha, America.